Hi, this is Kimberly Reuter, business advisor and supply chain expert and builder of startups. And welcome back to my podcast. So, we're going to talk about branding. And you're kind of wondering, like, what does this have to do with supply chain? Well, I also build startups, and it's kind of what really is my passion. I was building startups before COVID, and then consulting changed to supply chain during COVID because obviously people needed a lot of help. And it helps a lot of companies, but startups have always been my passion. I built startups at Amazon, so that's always kind of been where my head is at. So I'm working on a startup again. This is a startup. My podcast is a startup. My consulting business was a startup. I've built startups. I helped startups while I was consulting, and so I have a lot of experience with startups. So that's why I talk to you guys about startups. So in case you guys are out there and you're like, "What the hell is she talking about?" That's what it's about. So today I want to talk to you about branding. And if you go back 80 or 90 episodes or so, when I started this podcast, I was actually very no branding. And I talked to people about not focusing on brand at the very beginning of a company, of a startup, and why that kills almost every startup. But today, 80, 90 episodes later, I'm here to talk to you about building a brand and what is involved in that and what you should think about and why it's important because it is important. But I want people to understand it's also a great opportunity for me to talk to you guys about brand because not only am I going through my own branding exercise, but I am working with a new company, direct to consumer startup that we're also doing a branding exercise. And I want to tell you guys about what we're doing with this startup. So, this is a 135-year-old company. It's an oyster company based in Virginia, been on the same grounds for over a century. They do not have a logo, they don't have a brand. Yeah. All they have is a font and a couple colors. But they've been doing business for 135 years successfully. In today's era, especially if we're going to go digital, we need to have a brand. We need to have something that sets us apart. We need to tell a story better. There are a number of things that we need to do. But after 135 years, we're finally getting to brand. Okay. So I want to reiterate that for all those startups out there who just got some funding or you just got your first loan or whatever, and you're going about to blow way too much money on branded merch. 135 years, these people don't even have t-shirts. Okay. My podcast. I am probably by the time this guys hits you, probably about 115 episodes. I have been working off of a logo that I got off of AI with some colors based on my website. And I've been chunking along. But the time has come for me to brand the podcast. It has become a thing. So as you can see behind me, we've added some lights to kind of pull the colors together, and you're going to see some other changes if you haven't seen them already. But now I want to talk to you about why branding is important. Because ultimately it is important, but it is not the first thing that you do. As I also mentioned, I mentioned this 135-year-old company that's been cranking along multi-million-dollar business, and I also have mentioned Amazon in the past. Amazon was 5 years before they had the smile. It's a smile now, it wasn't a smile to start with. We'll just leave that there. So 5 years for Amazon, all right? So yes, you need brand, but it is not the first thing you need. Okay, so why is branding important? So ultimately, in today's environment, why is branding important? Well, first of all, there's a shit ton of competition out there. With the internet and marketplaces and the simplification of opening a store and logistics and all of this kind of shit, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people competing for what you do, what you sell, your services. Lots of competition. So you need a brand to identify you as being different. So as an example, if we didn't have brands, we would not know the difference between Converse and Nike. And we know there's a big difference between those two, right? But we wouldn't know the difference between those two if there wasn't actually a brand. And when you look at Converse and you look at Nike, totally different shoes, totally different brands, totally different markets, all of that. So that's why brand is important. The purpose of a brand is to set you apart from the competition and to also communicate to your potential customer why they want to work with you, buy your product, buy your services, stay at your hotel, whatever it is. But it's a way of communicating with the customer what you stand for, what's available, and what the expectations are through a visual, almost always through a visual. There's also some subliminal communication that happens as part of this with the colors that you use and how you position yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But that is why branding is important. And this is also why I tell people don't jump into branding when you first start out because you probably don't actually know who the fuck you are yet. It's going to take a minute for your services to really mature and figure out what they actually are. So, as an example, when I started this podcast, I wasn't really sure exactly what I was going to talk about. I knew that it would be supply chain leadership in life, but I wasn't really sure exactly where it was going to go and what we were going to lean into and what people were going to respond to. So we started with the morning mood because that's really what it was. It was a morning mood conversation like, what do I got going on? What do I want to talk about? But it evolved over 100 episodes plus, and it is matured into something that is worthy of an actual thought and a more descriptive name of what it is. So for me, I have partnered with Podify, who has helped me kind of figure out what my brand is for my podcast because I've just been, as you guys know, just kind of yapping into the mic, not really making a whole lot of sense. So they've helped me with my brand. So one of the things is my colors, making sure that my colors are consistent across all of my offerings, my website, now my podcast. I wasn't really doing that. It was purple before because that's what the room looked like when I moved in here, and that's where I was. So, one thing is color and having consistent colors. The other part of this exercise that we've been going through, and the color is the easy part, by the way, which is why I started there, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But the other part of branding and the exercise that you have to go through to have a good brand. And a brand is not what you like, what your kids like. Oh my God. Bless your children. I get it. They're your babies and you want them to be a part, but please stop letting them design your logos. It's not adorable. It's not. Okay, unless they're professional designers, they're probably not going to be able to do a good job. I'm just saying if they want to participate that's great, but please stop that. I've seen it too much. But the purpose of the brand and the purpose of going through a branding exercise, and if you go through a good branding exercise, what you will experience is that you will start to get a stronger definition of what you are, what your product is, who your customer is, and how you're going to market it. Because until you understand your brand, you can't market it. So you'll see people out there with marketing that's all over the place, right? They're bouncing. It makes no sense. It's crazy, right? It doesn't make sense because they don't understand their brand yet. So that is the purpose of branding. And part of what you do when you go through your branding exercises, and lots of different companies do it different ways. I happen to like the archetype branding exercises, which take the Jungian archetypes, 12 of them, and they kind of define you as what you are. And there's the leader, there's the hero, there's the rebel, there's the victim, there's all kinds of different archetypes, and you market according to them. Myself identify as the rebel with a ruler tendency. Just that's the expertise piece goes in. And if you work with me, you can be like, yeah, I see the ruler. And yeah, I can also see the rebel. So I kind of identify as a rebel. This oyster brand that I'm working with, I'm super excited about it. We went in thinking they were going to be a ruler, but because the humbleness and the age of the company and actually with the product that we're going to bring to the market, it's actually a hero. And so that was a very interesting exercise. So the first part of kind of figuring out your brand is who are you? What are you bringing to the market? And these union archetypes are a great way to do that to figure out who you are. The second part is what value are you bringing to the market? Now this is a tough one, and we're going to stick on this for a couple minutes. So buckle up because I've seen a lot of startups do this, and we'll be straight up about it. Okay. What problem are you solving? That is the number one question. What problem are you solving? So for me, in this podcast, the problem that I'm solving, the perceived problem that I see out there, actually, I know it's out there. I'm not even going to say it's perceived. I know it's out there because I talked to you and I'm getting feedback about this podcast. So I know it was a need for it. Problem I solved in the podcast market was that there was not a fresh, honest, experienced 3 decades of experience voice in podcasting. Not that I could hear, not that I found, not someone who is just knocking out the truth every fucking day, saying it, speaking the supply chain language, speaking in terms that supply chain employees of all levels and all backgrounds can understand. Let me tell you something, and I'm gonna double down on this because I got fired up about this a while back. I was doing a podcast with a woman from a Ivy League college, okay? University, I think they're called now. Ivy League University. I did not go to Ivy League University. I have a bachelor's in arts from Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. Lovely school, absolutely fabulous. Nothing bad to say about Marshall University. But in this particular situation, in a university setting, there was a grand misrepresentation of our market. And this was it. This person was female, and she said that she had started a female group to support women in supply chain because there were so few. Yeah, that pissed me off a lot because from her ivory tower at this Ivy League school, yeah, there probably aren't a lot of fucking women in supply chain because there aren't a lot of fucking women in supply chain at the top, as is on all industries. But if you grow up in this industry, if you started at the bottom like I did, sending telexes to ships and making copies and distributing them to mailboxes and desks, if you started there, it's all women. It's all women. Yeah, the warehouses are full of dudes because that's a freaking classic stereotype. But it's all women. You walk in a broker's office, freight forwarder's office, it's women. Right? So that's my value. That's the problem that I'm solving in the industry is that there was not a real bootstrapping voice in supply chain coming out of a lady. That's a loose use of that term, but I'm going to take it. Okay? So that's the problem I solved. So many companies that I talk to are like, oh, I don't know, well, it's very cool and I like it and I built it. My dad said it was excellent and we got some seed money and yeah, so we're it. And it's like, yo, dude, it's not even about that. Okay. What problem are you solving? Just because you think it's cool and your dad thinks it's cool and somebody kicked you a couple $1,000,000, like, yeah, what? So what problem are you solving? What problem are you solving? Because if you're not solving a problem, you're building for your vanity and you're wasting money. Okay. So the number one thing about defining a good brand is what problem are you solving? All right. And you're like, okay, well, all right, then smarty pants. Which oyster problem are you solving now? Well, here's the problem. I'm solving a problem in the direct to consumer industry on people who cannot get fresh oysters in the shell that are freezer stable. You can have them whenever you want. Yeah. And you don't have to shuck them, which is a skill not most people have. That is a problem solved right there. And by the way, most restaurants use these. And I'm going to make them available to you at home. I can't wait to tell you guys all about it. Anyway, so back to brand, right? The number one thing in the brand is you got to tell me what kind of problem you're solving. If not, you're just building for absolutely no purpose. The second part of branding in my exercises and what I do with branding is, what do you stand for? What makes you different? What makes your product different? What are the values, the ethos of your organization? Whatever that might be, nonprofit, a restaurant, a bar, a consulting business, a podcast. What is it what are the tenets that you will not break It's a good way to think about it because people are like, well, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. I'm like, okay, what will you not do? I will never do this. Okay. So, what is it that makes your thing special? What is the ethics, the morals, whatever it is around it? What is it? And there is no good or bad here. Okay. So, this isn't about it has to be clean and white. No, it can be dark and dirty. It doesn't matter, but you need to define it. Okay. So, for me, my biggest thing for my podcast was it had to be authentic. And I cannot tell you how many people have tried to like shift me slightly in one direction or the other to make it pretty. Now, I do like these lights. I'm gonna be honest. I'm kind of digging this, and I'm gonna reupholster the chair because we have the purple. We got a lovely teal linen that's gonna just pop that like nobody's business. Do that this week, and y'all see that next week. But these colors are interesting to me. They're not what my brand is about. If you took these colors away, my message would not change. My podcast would not change. But what I will not compromise on, what I will not do, and things that I have turned down is I will not muffle my voice. I will not dim my light. I will not scale back on authenticity. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. Because too many times, young leaders, women, especially people in supply chain, because there's just not enough mentorship. It is changing. You actually get a degree in supply chain now. You couldn't get that way back in the day. All of that, right, is changing. But there's not enough mentorship in supply chain. There's not enough people talking to the youngins in supply chain and helping them get better. And here's why. Because 90% of executives in the C-suite don't know jack shit about supply chain. So they have no idea how to mentor, help, or support, nor do they actually give a shit because it's not in their wheelhouse. Stone cold fact, y'all. So my voice will always be authentic and it will always speak to the supply chain person sitting at the desk, slogging it through, trying to make it happen. And if my voice changes from that, I will end the podcast because that is what was needed in the market. That's my value. I have over 30 years of experience building supply chains of every single size in countries all over the world for the bigs and the smalls. I've done everything from me and Walker, we're going to get him on the podcast, by the way, building a frozen steak startup in Seattle. Y'all, we shared a desk and we had to share the same desk for like a month. That's how small this company was. Just me and Walker building frozen steaks, direct to consumer, all the way to architecting the foundation, the international cornerstones of Amazon, the biggest company in the world. I've done it all. So my purpose, my brand, everything that I communicate through my brand is authenticity, is rawness, is honesty in its experience because I've been there. I've done it. I've done it. I've been in the warehouses. I've been at the piers. I've been watched containers come off of ships. I've inspected stuff. All of it. From top to bottom, big to small, sideways, and upside down when it comes to supply chain. And that is what I'm sharing. That's my purpose. And my brand reflects that. So you got to get honest about what you are and what you're trying to be and what your value, not your personal value, not like, oh, I look at myself in the morning and I think I'm the smartest person in the world. Not that shit. What is your value to the outside world? And when you can get dirty with that, you'll start to understand your brand. This is why you don't start with brand. You evolve into brand. All right. That's me. I hope you guys like the lights. The upholstery's coming. Super excited with that. But thank you for being with me all this time and sticking out with me when I didn't even have a brand. So if you're out there, you got a startup, you're doing something, you're thinking about it. First step, what problem are you solving? So you got to figure it out. All right, y'all. Peace out.